Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to another webinar that's being offered by Lutherwood Employment Services. Today, we have a very interesting topic to discuss. Actually, is something that we are kind of revisiting as 1 year ago, we discussed about the effect of the pandemic on the local job market. And now we are discussing the 2 years after that, what has changed and everything. And today we have our guest once again with us, Charlene Hofbauer from the Workforce Planning Board. It's so long the name I have to read. Workforce of Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin. Once again, sharing the data they collect with the local employers to understand the perspectives in our local job market. I'm very curious to understand what's going on. I know we were discussing a year ago, Charlene, about going remote, for example, and now it's something that I think this is a huge impact in many organizations right now, like some organizations that decided to go like 100% remote, no matter what, like from now on is part of the culture. And there are some people, especially in IT, for example, that they expect that the work is remote. So I'm very curious to understand how things are, the local employers, how they are dealing with all these changes, and I hope it's going to be informative for the participants today. This is a presentation that is also sponsored by or funded by the Immigration and Refugee Citizenship Canada, the federal government. One thing also that I want to inform the participants is that you have a box on our GoToWebinar platform that you can drop a question, and then depending on the question, if it's the moment, I'm going to share right away with Charlene. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it for the end. And that's it, Charlene. The floor is yours. Feel free.
Thanks. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm really looking forward to talking about what we've got going on in the labor market, talking about how the work has changed, what demand looks like now, and I really am looking forward to your questions or where you want more information. Before I start, I'm going to let you know that the data comes from places like Statistics Canada. It comes from Findyourjob.ca, which is a local job aggregation site. So that's how we track like postings and demand and things like that. And that's a partnership we do with the region of Waterloo, City of Guelph, Wellington County, and Dufferin County. And then I have some information around what employers are kind of thinking from the EmployerOne. So that's kind of where the data is coming from, where I'm getting my ideas. And I kind of take all that and I kind of give you some bigger trends going on based upon my analysis and what I'm hearing from employers and others in the community. So just to give you the heads up as to where that insight is coming from. So I am going to share my screen with you, and we're going to start this.
Charlie, okay, there you go. Because it was already shared, you can go.
What did I do?
It's okay, you can go. It's we can see your yeah.
There we go. So what I thought I'd start with is I told you that EmployerOne is one of those places where our data comes from. And 2 years ago, when Carlos and I were talking, and we did this for the first time, we were talking a lot about future of work trends. And the future of work is kind of here because we were talking about a lot of different things. And in EmployerOne, which is a biannual survey we do of local employers, we took some of those future of work trends and kind of asked them where they were on the spectrum. So, were they engaging with those things? Were they not? How many? Let's get a good idea. And so we can share this information with you. So, number one on the future of work, we thought, everything's going to be everything's going to be work from home. That's my chair, my apologies. Everything's going to be work from home. It's going to be flexible hours. This is going to be great. And what we found in the past 2 years is that not all jobs can be work from home. They can't all have flexible hours. And in fact, when we spoke to employers, about 35% of the 500 plus employers we spoke to said, we can't offer flexible work hours. We have schedules that have to be maintained. We need one person to show up when the other person's done. It's really hard for us to become too flexible. Think about healthcare and caring for people. Think about, manufacturers who have to run machines at certain times. They're finding it a little bit more hard to be flexible. 48%, almost half, were not looking to make people work from home at all. So they weren't considering it part-time for their employees. They weren't considering it full-time for their employees. They wanted their employees there. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, that about half of employers are probably not looking to go to work from home. And another 62% were not looking at flexible work arrangements. So they weren't thinking about work share. So, you share the job with someone else. They weren't thinking about gig work, which is something that keeps coming up again and again. So there are employers who are not thinking about these sorts of trends. And that's fair, because some of them can't, but some of them just, it's not in their wheelhouse right now because they're working on survival mode. And that is the case with some of our employers. 35% of employers had added some sort of automation or AI to their workplace, or they were planning to in the next 1 to 2 years. So some of that automation, we'll continue to see it moving forward. We'll see some artificial intelligence. As a nonprofit, I'm seeing like, oh, here's how to do automated expense reports. And that would take time off of my plate and put it onto some sort of automation approach. But it's still not a lot of employers at this point. So some upskilling will be needed if you're thinking about some of those industries that are more engaged in automation. On the flip side, though, a lot of companies are looking at adding new software or other technology to increase their productivity. And that's great news, because one of the fears of the pandemic and working from home was that productivity was going to be an issue. So employers are thinking of unique ways. Again, this means, new software, new technology, you're going to have to upskill. The other flip side of that is most employers were looking to train their employees. So you can get engaged right now with that software, different types of tech to increase productivity. But if you do walk into one of those jobs where that software is being used, employers are looking to train everybody. They're not letting people figure it out. 91% of employers we spoke to during EmployerOne would hire someone who's a good fit and would train them on the technical skills. So if you can prove good fit to employers, they're looking, okay, maybe you don't have these 2 or 3 programs I need. I could look at hiring you and training you on those pieces to get you up to productivity mode, and they're open to that. Employers are still working through how important diversity, equity, and inclusion is to their organizations. We saw a lot of variable answers, and when we asked them to rate it, the employees, it was about 470 employers, rated at about a 58.6 out of 100 in importance. So there are some organizations that are really focusing on diversifying, becoming equitable, becoming inclusive, and there are some who aren't seeing it as such a big challenge in their philosophy. Right now, like I said, some are in survival mode. They're not considering, how diverse is my organization. Others are only looking at certain types of diversity. So some are only looking at, they're male dominated, and diversity to them means more women. And for other employers, diversity means how many immigrants do we have sitting in our organization? What's our linguistic makeup? Where do we come from around the world? So they're working slowly towards that diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're starting to realize that it can be a wave. If they diversify, they can access more talent. So that's where employers are on a lot of what were the future of work trends 2 years ago. So what did July 2020 look like versus last month? So to give you some idea of kind of what's changed, this is on the supply side. So this is on your side. This is what your competition's looking like. The unemployment rate way back in July for Waterloo and Guelph was like 13 to 14%. And you know, 66 to 69% of people were participating. So we saw drops in participation rates. We saw that rise in unemployment rate. And last month, we saw that Waterloo and Guelph were both sitting at about 5.2% unemployment. This is a very small unemployment rate. 5% is you know, is danger zone for employers. So just so you can see how much people have returned to work, been able to secure employment again. It's a much smaller pool way back, even like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we've seen more people coming back. Waterloo's had a slight bump. Guelph's had a significant bump. Guelph's, if you're from Guelph, that's one of the highest participation rates in the province. That means people are looking for work or they are working. So 71% of the population in Guelph is engaged in the labor market. They're either working or they're looking for work. And we're at about 67% in the Waterloo region. One interesting thing is the challenges, though, haven't really changed for the workforce, or they're a little bit different. So childcare is still a big challenge. Daycares provincially are facing staff shortages. I sat at a provincial table where we were going to talk about childcare issues and labor market and all that. And what happened was the managers couldn't come to the meetings because they had to cover their staff. And that's because their staff are burning out. That's because their staff are becoming ill and they can't go into work. You have to isolate 5 days if you're fully vaccinated, 10 days if you're not. So childcare is facing that real challenge, both from the staffing perspective and from actually accessing it. Lack of experience is still preventing some employers from taking people on. It's been an interesting couple of months, I'll put it that way. For 40, 50, 60 years, employers have driven what's being offered on the table. You know, they've had the better hand in this situation. And with fewer people engaging in the labor market, seeing more people retiring, seeing people disengaging, going back to school, our talent pool has shrunk. So in some industries, employers are not the ones who have the power balance. It has shifted in some industries and in some occupations to workers deciding. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the articles out there about, you know, how many people are thinking about changing jobs. It used to be about 40% were looking for work, and I think the most recent statistic out of the US was 1 in 5 people fully expect they're going to leave their job in the next year. So not as big as it was, but still that's a significant number of people looking for work. And despite all this, fewer people are applying to positions. Our number one concern on the part of employers is that there's not enough applicants to any job. So competition could be lighter. And there might not be as many people for some roles. So employers have to think about who's coming to them and how they can either engage those people in their workforce, how they can upskill them, reskill them, how they can give them on-the-job training. So this is a new perspective for employers to have to think about these things because the talent pool is so small. Making sure I have the right one. So that's kind of what's happening right now on the supply side. I didn't put into this, but I'll cover it. You know, a lot of people have retired, especially in that 55 to 64-year-old bracket. There's been quite a few retirements. Our 55 and older population is growing, and the 55 and under is not growing at the same rate and returning to the market. So it's part of also why there's this this concern about how many people are available. But you'll probably also want to know how's demand changed. So this is a really good illustration for you. This is out of Findyourjob.ca. In July of 2020, there were 8,600 postings across Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin, and it was at about 3,500 employers. So if we go back to July 2020, do a rewind, you know, there were more, we were starting to open up patios, We were starting to slowly open up some other industries. Some were still shuttered, but it was like that summer of, okay, now what do we do? We're really confused and we don't know what's going on. By December of 2020, we were just about to go into lockdown, if I remember correctly on this one. And there was a lot of mumbling about going into lockdown. So employers didn't do as much hiring, did not post as much. You'll see the number dropped by about 1,500. But a year later, you'll see that it almost tripled. So last summer, we had patios open. You know, places like Binghamton's were getting creative. You know, they had a year to think it through. Manufacturing had taken off. You know, everybody was starting to look for people. So you'll see that from July to December, you don't really see that drop. It pretty much stayed at around 18,000, closing in on 19,000 postings from July to December of last year. We may have had a drop around October, but that would be about it. Then you look at last month. Last month, there were almost 23,000 job postings across Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin. 15,500 in Waterloo region, and almost a little over 4,700 in Guelph. So to give you some context of how many postings that is almost the exact number of people that are unemployed in each of those areas. So I think that the Waterloo region has officially 17,500 people unemployed last month, and Guelph had about 5,000. So our posting requests on the part of employers are almost matching our unemployed people. But the issue is that not all of the unemployed people have the skills those employers want. So we're seeing almost demand equaling unemployed, but now we're seeing there's that skills mismatch. And just to give you some perspective, 2 days ago, I went on Find Your Job, I looked it up. There were 8,200 available job postings just 2 days ago. So there's an incredible amount of demand on the part of employers across all skills, all industries, and all types of occupations. So some more information about what employers are looking for. So most employers are seeking full-time people. And actually, I think when I did this 2 years ago, it was something like 86% of all jobs were full-time. Now it's closer to 78%. So we've seen a little bit of a drop. We've seen maybe employers willing to be, you know, take some of their jobs and make them part-time. Still, 87% of those jobs are permanent. There are some industries that are more ruled by contracts. So for example, when we did our EmployerOne, we found that professional, scientific, and technical hires a lot of contract people. So very high skilled jobs with term limits. So if you're thinking of those professional, scientific, technical, you know, your engineering firms, your law firms, those sorts of things, you may have to start on a contract. So let me put that out there. And employers are looking for more education now than they were 2 years ago. So about 2 years ago, about 48% of employers were looking for that post-secondary, 43% of employers were looking for that skilled trades certificate. They were looking for college, they were looking for university. And in the past 5-6 months, we've seen that number flip to over 50% of employers are now seeking occupations where it's recommended that you have some sort of post-secondary or skilled trades certificate behind you. So that's something new. From what I've seen talking to my colleagues across the province, we're one of the first communities where this sort of shift has happened. Not so much in the Wellington County, Dufferin County area, but definitely in Guelph and Waterloo, you're seeing that shift to looking for very specific skill sets. What are employers paying? Everyone always asks me this. So to give you the heads up, remember there were about 15,000 job postings. Only 3,000 had pay attached to them. So about 1 in 5. The median's about $20 an hour, and 323 of those postings were paying minimum wage. Over in Guelph, which had about 4,700, we're at about 1,100 had pay attached. So Guelph employers a little more willing to attach their pay than Waterloo region employers. Again, but the median wage is sitting at about $20. We were tracking this when we started getting this data. This is down a little bit from a couple months ago. So there's been some shift in what employers are willing to pay. Or potentially some of those jobs below $20 an hour, maybe there's more demand for those right now than there were before. And that shifted that middle of the pack wage down a bit. So that's kind of what employers are looking for around full-time or permanent, what they're seeking skills-wise, and kind of what they're paying right now.
Charlene, we have two questions here.
Yeah.
One is more technical. It's about if you could explain what participation rate is.
Happily, I apologize. So participation rate, what we call that is we look at the whole population, and then we figure out how many people are actually participating in the labor market. So participation rate means that, you know, the percentage of people participating in the market versus the population. So what that is usually it's taken at 15 and over. So what percentage of the population that's 15 and over is actively looking for work? So we don't include students in that because they don't tend to be looking for work and as their primary function, or they are already employed. So that's what participation rate means. It means that that's the percentage of your population that is looking for work or is already working.
Okay, thank you. We have another question here from Agnes. She is asking how many employers in Waterloo region or Guelph are paying their employees the living wage? And has there been an increase since the start of the pandemic in numbers of living wage employers in this region?
So I don't have those exact stats because I can't gather everybody's pay wage, and not everybody shares, to be quite honestly. You can always, you can go to the job bank, and you can kind of see what the low end, the median, the middle, and the high pay is, but you can't verify, what percentage live in each space. But I will say, Agnes, that one thing I did notice is when the minimum wage went up in October, and I think it's due to go up in October again, employers aren't arguing with that. And it's one of the first times in the 20 years that I've been working with employers where employers have not been upset the minimum wage has gone up. And my instincts tell me is they're all paying, most of them are paying more than minimum wage. So minimum wage, I believe in Waterloo region is closing in on $18. It's a little bit more than $18 over in Guelph. So a lot of employers are already starting to either creep towards that living wage or already paying more than it, or if not starting at that point. There aren't, from what I've understood, there's still manufacturers that are paying close to minimum wage, but a lot are not because they just can't find the people. So the demand is driving some of that wage up. And like I said here, the middle of the pack is paying $20. So that's telling me that half the postings are over $20 an hour. So the question is, like, what does that look like? I'd have to go digging to actually figure that out. But based upon postings, I'm going to guess that probably 60% of employers, just off the top of my head, are probably paying at least living wage, if not more. And at this point, to rent an apartment in Waterloo region, I know Guelph, let's do Guelph. I know in Guelph that to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in Guelph is $1,800. If we're gonna, if people don't want to be at risk of losing their housing, 30% of their income, only 30% of their income can go to housing. So if that's the case and an apartment's $1,800, that means a person has to make $29.50 an hour to afford that apartment under that definition of not at risk of losing your housing. So I think employers are starting to become aware of what living actually costs, because right now I don't think that $17 for a single person is going to help them live much. So we'll have to see kind
Very,
of how that living wage shifts in the next year or two.
very good topic to discuss about. Thank you. You can go ahead, Charlene. No questions
All
for
right.
now.
So let me kind of share with you what's Waterloo region hiring versus Guelph. And you'll see the two lists, and I'm not going to go through everything, but you'll see that 8 of the roles are common. It's just where they fit, right? Like both, number one is retail salespeople. Everyone needs retail salespeople. I don't know. I just heard from someone, this was happening. I live in a small town. So my Starbucks only stays open to 7 o'clock. And we're lucky if they always stay open at 7 o'clock. I believe my Harvey's has just officially reopened its dining room. Why? Staffing. Our KFC has inconsistent hours. But I'm starting to hear this is happening in the cities now. So, rural was kind of that thermometer of what this was going to look like, and now it's hitting cities. And I'm hearing that retail and food are really struggling to find people. And it shows up when you look at the top 10. The real estate, the retail salespeople, the retail managers, the food counter attendants, the cooks, these are the people who keep places open, especially fast food joints. So you'll see that they come up, and if we can't fill those positions, some of these places are going to have to shift their service. But you'll see that there's 2 differences in these areas. Software engineers and sales and account reps show up in Waterloo. These are both higher skilled occupations. Software engineers are university educated. Sales and account reps, I think they put at a college level. A sales and account rep's a little bit different than a customer and info service rep. Customer and info service reps could be anyone from, calling into a call center right on through to you're supporting customers with your product if you're a manufacturer, or if you're like construction or something like that. You're not quite the warranty administrator, but maybe you support warranties if it's new builds. So sales and account reps, though, are out there actively seeking business. They're much more, out there, aggressive, that sort of thing. So sales and account reps show up in manufacturing components. They show up in that professional, scientific, technical, that IT, those sorts of roles again and again. So Waterloo region, that's where it kind of differs. It's got a couple of sales and software. I'm going to be honest, not all the software occupations are in IT. When we start looking at them, they're all over the place. There's manufacturers hiring software engineers, finance is hiring them. Some of the nonprofits are hiring them if they're bigger nonprofits. There's a lot of innovation happening across a variety of sectors. In Guelph, the 2 that stand out as different are those home support workers. So those personal support workers who work for at-home services, or maybe they're cleaners who work in homes, that is much more in demand in Guelph than it is in Waterloo region. And so are light duty cleaners. So light duty cleaners different from housekeepers in that a light duty cleaner might clean a hotel, or they might clean an office space, or they could clean a manufacturing space. They're working in a lot of different environments. So that's kind of where the 2 differ. But everything else you'll kind of see there is the same. It's just different demand levels. So who's hiring? This is always what people want to know. So right now we're discovering, which is no different from the pandemic, is that businesses are using placement agencies for a lot of their hiring, especially manufacturing. That general labor role, a lot of it's being done through placement agencies. And it's because a lot of employers don't have the staff to hire people. Their staff are so busy doing other things that they don't have the time to step back, go through the recruitment process. And trust me, the recruitment process is quite long if you're devoting yourself to it. The other reason is they can't find the people. They've already used everybody they could think to use, and they're stuck because they didn't find enough people. So they're turning to those paid services to find them people. And the positions, like I said, are everything from a straight hire through to contract periods or, short-term contracts, that sort of thing. So placement agencies are doing a lot of the hiring and posting in Waterloo and in Guelph. Healthcare and education, still hiring. The drive behind that is one, staff burnout. We've heard a lot about teachers and nurses just getting tired. In fact, we're seeing a bit of an exodus on the 55 to 58-year-old teacher and nurses because they can access their pensions. So some of those people are deciding to move on into other things or take a break, and maybe they'll come back. But also we're seeing that the roles that are in demand are supply roles. So it's not the teacher who's in the classroom every day that's in demand. It's the teacher that covers off illnesses, covers off absences. The same with the educational assistants, same with the early childhood educators, and even custodial in both of those industries is having problems. Like, they can't find enough cleaners for education facilities and for healthcare. So as I was speaking to one hospital, they said, you can start casual, but you're going to get a pension and you're going to get good pay and it's unionized. And she goes, I never used to have to look for these roles, and now I do. So those are two industries that are still very much in hiring mode. Manufacturing, as I said, doing a lot of its hiring through placement agencies, but they're still doing a lot of hiring. Right now, they seem to have worked through their supply issues. This was one thing that was kind of slowing manufacturing down, was they were having a hard time accessing supplies from other countries. But they seem to have worked through everything, and product seems to be flowing into the country now, so that's letting them do what they need to do. I know that for the first time, I saw Toyota was really pushing hiring, and I've never seen Toyota have to actually physically hire, because they just always seem to have people. So again, those companies that have never had to recruit so actively are now having to recruit. Accommodation and food services and arts, entertainment, recreation. 2 years ago when we talked, they were like, how are we gonna keep the people who we've had to lay off because they were so frustrated? And tourism was going nowhere 2 years ago. But those two industries form a big chunk of the tourism sector, and they're hiring. In fact, I saw that Binghamton still doesn't have its full complement of students. So if you have any kids and they're working age, they might want to apply over at Binghamton's. And I know that the accommodation and food services would really like to meet as many people as they possibly can, because if we want patio season, we need servers and cooks and all of that. So it's a little bit of both in those situations where, in order for them to grow and to fully recover, they're going to need to find those people. Hotels also, I find, are also hiring right now. Some industries are being cautious and not doing large hires. So, they're not quite ready to fully come back, but they're being cautiously optimistic. I know some of my nonprofit colleagues across the area are being cautiously optimistic. They're kind of filling those positions they need to fill, and they're filling specific gaps so that their staff aren't overwhelmed. I didn't mention construction in this one. It's another one that there's a big need for construction trades helpers and laborers. So you don't have to have a skilled trade, but you can meet, if you're thinking about going into a skilled trade, or maybe you have that background, starting on that path could lead you into an apprenticeship down the road. So I know they are also struggling for a lot of people. So as always, I like to always tell you what are the top 10 companies that have posted in the previous month. So if you kind of look at this, you think about what I talked to you about, there's those industries all represented. There's education, there's finance, there's manufacturing, there's your healthcare, there's your retail in Lowe's and Home Depot. So when I tell you that these are the industries that are hiring, it's reflected in the top 10 posting companies. That there's Mars and Linamar, and OpenText I think has a little bit of manufacturing as well. you know, so we're seeing that that demand is reflected in who is hiring. So this was accurate as of the end of April, and I bet if you looked today, you'd probably see that a lot of these companies are still hiring because they are struggling to find that talent across the larger area. Google's done a lot, is doing a lot of hiring, just in case you have a tech background, or they're hiring a lot of people to be program managers. So they're looking for people who have that project experience behind them, not necessarily IT experience, but definitely, you know, they can function in an IT environment. So that's lots of opportunity and at lots of different skills levels. I want to talk a bit about work from home because, you know, Carlos brought it up at the beginning, and I kind of hinted at it at the beginning of this whole discussion. But right now, there's a website that tracks work from home opportunities across the province. It's called WorkFromHomeOntario.ca. So if you're thinking about remote work or work from home, this is a great site for you. I was on it again last night. It actually comes out of my Findyourjob.ca tools, but across the province. So as of yesterday, there were 3,004 job opportunities across the province that people can apply to that are specifically work from home. Somewhere in that job posting, it's been designated as a work from home opportunity. Largely, those opportunities are going to be business, admin, finance, sales, service roles, because those are really easy to do from home. You need an internet connection. You need possibly some sort of Google phone, you know, where you can have Google send to your cell phone, and you need some internet. So those are the sorts of ones that if you're looking at working from home, those are the 5 roles that are easiest and probably in the highest demand when we think about working from home. Gig workers are also in there as well. I saw a few Uber drivers. Technically, that is a work from home situation. But if you're looking for that opportunity, I'd strongly recommend you go there because it's going to be something that continues to exist. It meets people's demands, it meets their needs, and I think this is not going away. I think at the beginning people thought it would go away, it'd be temporary, and our development of that site in partnership with our other workforce planning boards across the province is basically saying it's not going anywhere. And you can actually get all this information, or most of it that I gave you. You can go to Findyourjob.ca if you're ever curious about a certain occupation. We have a job demand report that gives you info every month, and you can customize it to, you know, the industries of interest to you, the occupations of interest to you, and your area. If you're interested in a specific occupation, you can always go to our occupational library. You can get all, like, a list of titles that employers use that are connected to that, the employers who've hired for it, as well as salary information. So the person who asked about living wage, you could pop on there and you can kind of see what, you know, if you're looking at a certain occupation, does this occupation pay a usual living wage? And that data is kind of there. You can also create a job seeker account and follow industries and occupations that interest you. So the postings pop up straight into your inbox. And if you need to know how close a job is to schools or childcare, or maybe you're in a training program because you're retraining, we have a map that kind of shows where the jobs are located. So you can kind of look and see, oh, there's my kid's school and this job is, you know, 5 streets over. This might work really well with our travel patterns. So it can help you kind of address some of those challenges. We're working on transportation routes. It's a little bit weird. So we're working with the region of Waterloo right now, and we're trying to pair it up with some stuff that Google does. So hopefully we'll see that soon. And that info is updated hourly from 30 different job boards. So there's a great opportunity there to see it all and what it looks like. Sorry, my apologies. And to know what that data looks like, and you can get it, like I said, day to day, month to month, whatever your preference is of as you look for that data. So that is all the data I have. I'd really love to hear if you have any more questions or something I haven't covered for you. Maybe Carlos has some questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Charlene. It was really, really interesting. I think you brought to us a really interesting data, especially for those looking for jobs to have a perspective in terms of, to establish a strategy. Should I move to another field of, if that's the time? Should I expect, for example, employers hiring for remote jobs and things like that, if that's what I want? So I think you covered a lot of things here that were really, really interesting. Um, I'm not sure if we don't have any questions right now. If you have any questions for Charlene, please feel free to drop it right now. I have one in the meantime. I don't know also if Polly, Cindy has any questions, or Carla, for Charlene. So one thing that I would like you kind of explain already, but if you can develop a little bit more about this. You are explaining that employers here, they were not that willing to be flexible when it comes to working from home. Of course, depending on the nature of the job, right? Like you have to be there. There is no, like as you were mentioning, like if you work in the health sector, there is, you can't be a nurse and working from home. Although I'm talking to my doctor over the phone now, it's been a while that I don't see her. But anyway, so and then you mentioned also about the 5%, that is a dangerous spot to be as an employer when the employment unemployment rate is so low. So, can you maybe elaborate more about it? Okay, so you have employers. So let's put aside these all these jobs where the nature is you have to be in person. There is no other way, right? But let's say office jobs that sometimes you can do from home, but employers are not willing to let you work from home, versus this unemployment rate of 5%. That is a dangerous spot. One thing that I've noticed, not in this region, but following like discussions on LinkedIn, for example, is that people are quitting their jobs because companies are going back to the office and they don't see any reason why to go back to the office, and they are just quitting and find another job that's remote. There is a company in London. You're from London, right? You live in London, correct? London,
I did live in
Ontario.
London for a while, yeah.
Yeah. So there is a company there called Big Vikings. It's a video game company, and they are always advertising on LinkedIn, work from anywhere in the world, blah blah blah. That's their catch to find talent. Can you explain how is this affecting the local job market? Like, I know that you have this perspective from employers, but do you see any changes or that they will have to do down the road because of this 5%, and then you kind of have to go with the flow? Like, if that's the trend, that's the way I have to go. Otherwise, I'll not have anybody working for me. Can you kind of
Yeah.
talk
So
about this?
what I'm finding when we have these conversations and these sorts of things happen is the really frustrating part is there are a lot of employers out there who aren't getting, they see they don't have people. They see they don't have people applying. They see, well, people are coming with exact skills I want, but it's still not registering to them that there's no one, or there's very few people available. And I'm calling it, they're basically, I think it was Einstein's or somebody's version of insanity, where you keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that happen. And I spoke to a young gentleman this morning. I'm interviewing for a project researcher for a student, and he said, you know how exciting it was that I looked at your posting and everything I needed was there. You didn't hide anything from me. He goes, you put out the hours, you put out, yes, I'm hybrid. If you don't like it, oh well. He said you laid everything out on the table. He goes, and I went through an interview and I just couldn't help thinking, you're hiding something from me, like this other company. And I said, yeah, that happens because people are asking, the job seekers are asking us to shift. They're asking us to reconsider them, you know, they want to be seen as people. They want to be seen as, you know, my employer sees me as a person, respects my time, my energy, my effort. And that has to start right at the beginning. So Big Viking Games saying, okay, you can work from anywhere because we understand you. Maybe you want to work for us, but you don't want to come to London. And so, but you're excited about us. And we want that. We'd rather have that excitement than that proximity. We believe you're going to be a productive person. We believe you're going to be a great team member. So to that conflicts with that older, I need to see FaceTime, I need to see you in person. And I think those who can shift to that new model of, I trust you as an employee because you're smart enough, I'm going to hire you, versus that, if I don't see you, I don't believe you're doing the work. And that's where it comes down to. We've been trying to have this conversation with employers, you know, what do your job postings look like? They're like, well, they look like they always look like. They look like a job posting. I said, no, there's good ones, there's bad ones. And I think that's the other part is, on the part of a job seeker too, the recognition there's good ones and there's bad ones. And what does that say about the company? And I'm trying to say, you know, as a job seeker, you know your first impression's that resume. I don't think employers recognize their first impression is a job posting. And so this is kind of where we're starting to work with the chambers and things like that to get that information out. But I would say keep using that job posting as that first impression of an employer. You know, Big Viking has captured their essence in a job posting. And if we're going to compete with a company like Big Viking here in Waterloo region, we have to decide as industries and as companies who we want to be to attract those people in.
Great, awesome. We have some questions here. Another question is, how someone gets an experience if employers keep asking for at least 2 years of experience, even in retail?
That's a good question. And I'm sure a lot of Employment Ontario service providers have better answers than I do, but let me try to think about all the things you guys have ever told me. You know, there's ways to get it. Like that 91% of employers that we met who said, you know, a candidate who's a great fit and doesn't quite have the experience or the skill I'm willing to train. You as an employer, usually a job seeker, this is your chance to say, okay, I don't have this experience, but I have these great skills. And this is another thing we're trying to tell employers is, okay, you know, that person has sales skills, but they don't have them in your industry. Okay, well, it'd be a lot easier to train somebody in your industry than to try and introduce the skill set. So lack of experience does, I spoke to it because it was something we talked about 2 years ago. But when I looked at EmployerOne, it's actually fallen to 3 or 4. They're more concerned about people not having the skills. So I think employers are starting to think skills more than they had in the past. And how do you take a skill and transfer it over? Yeah, kind of your duty as a job seeker is to explain how that skill will transfer over. And not make an employer guess. And I'm kind of saying this as an employer too, because I've hired a lot of project coordinators and project coordinators from other industries who can't tell me how, you know, their IT experience will transfer to a nonprofit role. They're very different. So I think that's one thing to always keep in the back of your mind is I can't expect the employer to guess everything. So kind of just laying it out for them is really, really nice. And it also shows me your communication skills, which I know as an employer, I'm always looking for. It moved into number 4 from number 6 last year in our EmployerOne. So communication skills went up in the importance of employers in the past 2 years as well. So hope I answered that. And if not, ask me a follow-up.
Okay, so I have another question here from our colleague Cindy. She was curious about the that you're explaining about the training, right? Like as you're explaining right now, like some employers willing to train the person, even if that person, if the person doesn't have the experience or the expertise in specific softwares, these and that. What type of trainings were listed by those employers?
See, we didn't go too far into what we asked them was, you know, if you encounter somebody great fit, need technical skills, would you train them? And the person said yes. And then we said, would you do that internally or would you do that externally? And most employers would do it internally. So they fully expect that they had that ability. We did ask the question though, what are your most common types of training? It's not in our report, but you'll see it, Cindy, as we release our industry reports, which will start hoping early June. There'll be some of the most common types of trainings for different industries. And the industries we're doing are manufacturing, retail, professional, scientific and technical, construction, and healthcare. So those are the 5 dominant ones that we have done, and they are 5 big hiring organizations. So watch for that, and you'll see that data coming out in the next 2-3 weeks.
Okay, I think I have another one here. Give me 1 second. Let me open. So I have one here. So I'm just gonna read here. I'm wondering what data you have on trends in the not-for-profit industry in the Waterloo area. For example, I'm thinking of organizations that are offering affordable housing and support/services to those who are living with mental illness or using substances, those doing work in our community to address the rise in food insecurity, etc. So if you have any data trends, I believe in hiring around this field.
That is a very specific field. And to get to that level of data would require quite a bit of money. So I don't. But what I do have is last year we actually worked with a lot of the some of the nonprofits locally. We had about quite a few of them respond. And what we did was we talked about the transferable skills from industry to from one part of nonprofit to another part of nonprofit. And we looked at, I think, 11 different types of jobs that we all have as nonprofits, or the most common. And then we actually articulated what are the skill sets and how important are those skill sets in our industries. So you could actually look at that to get a good sense of how to start to formulate an application. And then you could talk about your specific knowledge in those, in housing, in food access, because that's what we were talking about. We were like, okay, I have project coordinators and you have project coordinators, but mine have to have research, yours don't. But where are those commonalities? And start to figure out those commonalities that are happening. I do know some of those organizations are hiring. I know there was a high demand in the winter for shelter workers. It was incredible. Like, I think everybody there was talk of a job fair and everything else. So shelter workers is very, very common in the winter time. But specific industry to industry, I don't have such a targeted industry. You'd probably, if you went looking and you looked at something like the social and community service worker on the occupational library at Find Your Job, if that's the sort of thing you're thinking, it will actually show you who's done hiring for that role in the past while. You could look to see who's a match in that industry for you.
Okay, she was asking also about where could she access these documents. So I believe the website and the library. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you go to workforceplanningboard.com, you go to our knowledge library, or maybe you could even go to our projects. It might even be in there. And it's called Transferable Skills, the Nonprofit World. And it will give you, whatever. So if you're thinking admin, or if you're thinking program coordinator, or you're thinking what our frontline staff, it'll actually talk a bit about what were some of the commonalities we saw across all nonprofits. So it starts to give you that base for a resume.
Great. I have another question for you, taking advantage that you are here with us. Let's talk about competition here, right? Like we have our region. We know that based even on your presentation, I could see that Waterloo region is more technological. Guelph is more manufacturing kind of thing. So for Waterloo region, especially because I think manufacturing, most of the positions are more like you have to be in the factory and things like that. going back a little bit with the working from home, and when it comes to competition for the best, like talents and stuff. Now I have to compete as an employer with an employer in Toronto or in London or whatever. Do you consider that our employers right now are behind this, like whatever trend is out there? Because you mentioned also about diversity, for example, and it's not a priority for many, some because they are trying to survive, other like I don't know the situation there, but uh, do you feel that we are staying behind in terms of what centers like Toronto, Vancouver, even in the US and things like that, where people are competing with a global, like it's a global market now, right? Like you can work from anywhere and stuff. Are we staying behind or no?
I'm not 100% sure because honestly, that data I collected for EmployerOne is the first time we've ever really tried to baseline that data. So I do know when I pulled out Waterloo region, their response to that diversity question versus the rest of them, Waterloo region scored that lower. And that kind of surprised me because I think of Waterloo region as more diverse than like Wellington County or Dufferin County or even the city of Guelph. Like it's a perception, right? And I think maybe perception is affecting some of that of scoring. I think one of the challenges that's going to exist, and this is something that kind of came through the pandemic and we've been exploring, is we had a lot of people move in from the GTA into Waterloo region, even into Guelph. A lot of those people stayed working with Toronto employers. So they didn't really grow our labor market. So this will be interesting to see how this kind of plays out in the next while, because they're not a talent pool. They're not part of that talent that exists out there that wants to work here because they're making more money in the GTA, but they're getting cheaper housing here, right? So they're ahead. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not 100% sure if we're ahead. I'm not sure if we're behind. If I had to say guess, we're probably middle of the pack. We're thinking about these things. We're talking about them. We have an economic development that's talking about them. That bodes well for us. And I say that across most of our area, Waterloo, Wellington, and Dufferin. But I'm not really sure where we are in that game just yet, because I think that's going to take a little bit more time to see where exactly we end up. It's like I say, it's still early, as weird as that sounds after 2 years, but it is.
Okay, Charlene, I would like to thank you once again for your presentation. It was really, really important to learn from these numbers that you brought to us today. I have here many people sharing that they really enjoyed this presentation. It was really informative. I would like to thank also all the participants for coming today and joining our webinar. Charlene, I don't know if you have any last words for our participants before we close our.
Yeah, I think if I can just encourage you to, that EmployerOne report, it's on our website, it's under EmployerOne, check it out, see what employers are saying, see what they're, figuring out where you fit is part of the challenge, and I get that. And that's one way to do it, but also, the city and the region, all that, support Findyourjob.ca. It's got new tools coming in the upcoming year. Take a peek, think about, what industries am I interested in, what careers am I interested in, and what sort of data can I glean from it? Because we also have like a skills report. So, these are the most reported skills for this one. And that's just what takes your resume just a little bit further, or going to your employment counselor like Carlos or anyone else from Lutherwood and saying, this is what I saw, like, how do I incorporate this? Is this something you think I have? Is this somewhere you think I demonstrate it? And that's that fit piece, which is so elusive, and it helps you kind of figure out what you're doing moving forward.
Perfect. So for those that are looking for employment, please reach out to us, to Lutherwood Employment Services. We have offices in Guelph, Cambridge, and Kitchener. So if you are in one of these areas, please reach out to us and we'll be more than glad to help you. We are finishing our presentation now. So once again, thank you very much for the participants. Thank you very much for Charlene to be here with us today once again. Thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.